50% of the tomatoes consumed in this country come from Mexico. Picked likely by an indigenous person. It's put in a bucket, put on a truck, and it heads across the border from California to New York. They end up in every major retail chain in the United States. Customers put those tomatoes in their hand, puts it in their dinner table that night.
Retailers like Walmart, like Whole Foods, have demanded sustainable, ethical growing standards.
What we uncovered contradicted that.
When you hold that tomato in your hand, will you wonder, where did it come from? Well, it came from the hands of people who are living like animals.
Product of Mexico was a collaboration between photojournalist Don Bartletti and I. It was published in December 2014, and the investigation exposed the abusive working conditions of migrant farm laborers at Mexican export farms. We returned in March of this year to check on the progress. This video series explores both chapters of that story. My name is Richard Morosi. I am a journalist and a staff writer for the Los Angeles Times.
My name is Don Bartletti. I'm a photojournalist with the Los Angeles Times. When Richard and I began this story, we were motivated by the connection between the export produce to our country.
The export market of produce to the United States has grown to nearly $8 billion in the past few years. Big story, but it was missed by a lot of journalists.
The fact that that's a huge amount of commerce was important to our editors.
But there was a bigger story. A story about corporate malfeasance and general labor abuses at these big export farms. And a lot of these corporations claim to have socially responsible supply chain management. Every major distributor in the United States has agents, has people, has representatives all over these farms, but they're in the fields. They're looking at the plants. These same folks aren't spending a lot of time in the labor camps looking at the conditions of the people that are picking the produce. This is Walmart, this is Safeway, this is every big restaurant chain, this is salad bars across the country. This is where this produce is going. Not just a pretty picture, that's also got some ugly elements to it. Most of the produce that comes to the United States comes from the northwestern state of Sinaloa. That's where most of the big agribusinesses in Mexico are, and that's where most of the big labor camps are. This whole economy works because labor contractors mine these villages for cheap labor from Mexico's poorest regions. They're generally in southern Mexico, they're generally indigenous regions. Much of my coverage initially, it was just focused on folks outside the labor camps, getting firsthand accounts of what it was like to be in there, trying to get those rich details, right, to convey the difficulties of life in there. The reason we got in was because Don Bartletti, the photographer, that wasn't enough for him, of course.
Personally, to me as a photojournalist, I can't see money, I can't see figures, I can see faces. That's what I wanted to show. I wanted to show the American people the faces behind the story.
This investigation had numerous complications, problems, and challenges. One of the biggest challenges was finding these people.
We had no addresses, we had no farms, we had no confirmation, but we would drive the dirt roads through the countryside of Jalisco and look and ask locals, are harvests being done now? It's like a scavenger hunt almost. We got into maybe a dozen camps. We were kicked out of maybe a dozen, and we visited and observed from the outside maybe 20 or 30.
There's an important distinction. Most of the big agribusinesses, they recognized that this was a potential scandal, and overnight, the industry got rid of most of the labor abuses. It didn't happen at the small farms, some of whom are linked in the supply chain to the United States.
We would walk into the fields and immediately be questioned by the mayordomo or the field boss. We would explain who we were. We never tried to hide our identities. seeing the workers laboring 10 hours without shade that we mandate, without water that we mandate, without food that should be available, and proper clothing, shoes. It wasn't there. None of that was there. No bathrooms were provided. The only bathrooms available were in between the rows or in the woods.
At the fields of the big agribusinesses, they did provide water and access to bathrooms. But in their labor camps, it was a different story.
From the world of high-tech farming, where the produce is treated with utmost care and is regulated by codes that are enforced and adhered to, the worker will leave the field at the end of 10 or 12 hours and cross into another world, a world of filthy floors, of no beds, of bathing in canals, of nothing that you and I would ever want to live with. Most of the camps had strands of barbed wire along their perimeter. There was 24-hour guards. They were not allowed to leave, almost to the point of enslavement.
Sí, le doy el área toda vuelta, más vuelta, pero no puedo salir. Siento que como que alguien me tiene como este mecate.
There's rats. They only get 2 bowls of lentil soup a day. They don't get paid until the end of the 3 months. They wonder, hey, so much care is taken into the production of these tomatoes, and look at how we live.
There was, at the entrance, a camp store. Tortillas, meat, canned goods, toilet paper.
Problem is, they're usually sold at a big markup. There's no price tag on these.
And at the end of the growing season, many people don't have enough money to pay cash.
You end up owing money or are prevented from going home because they owe money to the company store.
The owner of a store in one camp, he said, "I'm going to take your child if you don't pay." Well, the man took it very seriously. And when we interviewed him,
he was traumatized.
Aquí en la tienda dicen que si en caso de que no pagues la tienda, te quitan un niño o una chamaquita, lo que sea, con tal que se quede algo con el tiendero. Sí, así está la cosa.
Alejandrina is a 12-year-old girl from the state of Guerrero whose mother took her out of school at the age of 3 to go on the road as a migrant farmer. She was a cute, precocious little girl, very sweet voice, very energetic, one of the fastest pickers in her extended family.
Pickers like Alejandrina aren't paid by the day. There's no minimum. Either you work hard and make a lot of money, or you work a little and you don't make a lot. So she's being paid piecemeal depending on how much she produces on that particular day.
Alejandrina was paid by the 60-pound bag of jalapenos. Once it was filled, sewn up, and taken to the truck that would take it to the distribution house, she would get about $2. Alejandrina's mother said that if my daughter doesn't work, we can't eat. The wages are so low that unless multiple members of a family are working and pooling their money, they can't survive.
Yeah, to me, I'm an investigative reporter. I'm driven in part by outrage. And these are the invisible people of Mexico. They have no champion. Politicians don't pay attention to their problems. It's a life of struggle and hardship, and it's relentless. And you wonder how they can endure these lives. Walmart, in effect, is the government out there.
In March of 2015, a strike broke out.
Thousands of workers dropped their bags, got out of the fields, and they took over the roads.
It was like something I'd never seen. Is this the beginning of a new revolution, I wondered?
Product of Mexico was a collaboration between photojournalist Darn Bartletti and I. It was published in December 2014, and the investigation exposed the abusive working conditions of migrant farm laborers at Mexican export farms. We returned in March of this year to check on the progress. This video series explores both chapters of that story. So the series Product of Mexico came out in December 2014 and apparently shook up the industry immediately. It put pressure on the Mexican government and the industry to follow through on some of its reform promises that would focus on improving the lives of more than 1 million Mexicans. A social responsibility alliance. Different retailers reacted different ways. Certain individual agribusinesses started improving conditions down there, installing beds, getting rid of company stores. They've been improving bathroom facilities in some of these places, access to water, better food. Walmart also announced reforms that they would start improving things down there. When Walmart speaks, everyone listens. Labor laws are not enforced by the Mexican government, either because they turn a blind eye or they're cowed by the powerful growers. The most powerful entity is Walmart and the other retailers. If Walmart wants something, it will get done. That can really prompt change, and it can prompt change overnight. So that's why people say Walmart, in effect, is the government down there. Some of my coverage apparently brought consumer awareness to this issue and contributed to declining sales because of boycott fears. Word gets out, consumers care. It's not just about food safety anymore, it's about treating people humanely. Because at some point, another journalist is going to go down there and embarrass them all over again, and they don't want that kind of attention. There's a lot of skepticism out there also as well, that this is just PR, that they're only doing this because they've been scrutinized and they have to at least appear that things are changing. So there's been good signs, but there's also been signs of resistance. In Mexico, there's tremendous collusion between industry and the government because some of the same players are in both. And in Sinaloa, the biggest industry is agriculture. It brings in the jobs, it brings in the revenues. You gotta keep the growers, the job creators, happy.
In March of 2015, after we published Product of Mexico, a strike broke out in Baja California, about 200 miles south of the Tijuana border, a big growing area for tomatoes, strawberries, and other berries.
The Baja strike was not a direct outgrowth of Product of Mexico, but we put a spotlight on it and forced a reaction. It put pressure on the Mexican government and the industry to follow through on some of its reform promises. Thousands of workers dropped their bags, got out of the fields, and they took over the roads. There were intense face-offs with police, sometimes rockings turned violent. They burned down buildings, they burned down cars, they took over that road, and they blocked all shipments of produce from that region to the United States. It was a big deal. The industry lost tens of millions of dollars.
Laborers were upset at their wages had not changed in many, many years. A riot broke out, police were called in, the Mexican army came in, and it was a huge embarrassment. The news spread like wildfire throughout Mexico. And it began an extended walkout at exactly the time that the strawberry harvest ripened for export to the United States. The export product was left rotting in the fields. It was a remarkable scene to photograph of thousands of people waiting on the sides of the road from San Vicente down to San Quintin, a stretch of many miles. People were holding signs saying, "We're not slaves." And they were only asking for a few dollars a day. Fidel, one farm worker, said, he was saying this to the farmers, "Your wages are in the clouds. You know where our wages are? Our wages are in the dirt." And he told one Mexican politician, he said, "You make more in an hour than we make in a year." And that was pretty dramatic, pretty damn true. The strike lasted several weeks and ended up with a historic agreement to raise wages. Such an agreement is very rare in Mexico. This was a big achievement. It was like something I'd never seen. Is this the beginning of a new revolution, I wondered? Well, in a way, it was a revolution, because never have farm workers risen up like that and actually got a result. What happened in San Quintin is important because it showed the power of what an organized group of farm laborers can do. It shook up the industry because they fear that if this could spread to other part of Mexico, it could really shake things up. It could really raise wages. It could really change the dynamics. What grew out of that was the establishment of 2 independent farm labor unions. It also showed the power of consumer behavior in the United States to affect things. There were calls for boycotts, in particular for Driscoll's, the world's largest berry distributor, apparently affected their sales. Driscoll's took a lead role in ending the strike and boosting wages.
Question now is, are the farms complying with these terms? Que un año después lograron, habían logros, ¿qué piensas? No.
Y estamos pagando en el mínimo, es el doble, más del doble del salario mínimo en México.
That was a view that most reporters had never seen before.
How much do you want to sacrifice for the benefit of the worker?
And I think the industry is realizing that, much to their horror. Product of Mexico was a collaboration between photojournalist Darn Bartletti and I. It was published in December 2014, and the investigation exposed the abusive working conditions of migrant farm laborers at Mexican export farms. We returned in March of this year to check on the progress. This video series explores both chapters of that story. During the strike, Driscoll's Berrymex was targeted in part because they are probably the biggest operation down there, and partly because they're vulnerable. They have a label, they have a brand to protect. So what do labor's leaders do? They focus on the company with the most to lose. So deserved or not, they're going to get much of the rage, much of the criticism directed against them. So we're going back to Mexico 1 year later to check on the conditions of the workers and the progress of the labor movement. The question now is, are the farms complying with these terms?
¿Cuál año de su vida empieza aquí en el rancho?
En otras partes he estado trabajando desde los 8 años.
¿Se puede ganar suficiente para vivir?
Pues para vivir la más.
¿Me puede ver su cara?
No puede.
La huelga del año pasado del movimiento laboral, ¿te acuerdas? Todo el movimiento. ¿Estuviste parte de eso? ¿Que un año después lograron, habían logros? ¿Qué piensas? No.
Driscoll's is one of the better companies that pays better, decent wages than some of the other well-known and established companies.
Like which ones?
Pinos, for example.
So why is Pinos getting away with that?
I don't know.
The owners of Driscoll's paid a lot of attention to our coverage of the Baja strikes, and they reacted to it.
Driscoll's ended up raising wages after the strike started under pressure from the labor movement.
It's unreal. Driscoll's was state of the art.
We haven't gone inside yet, but based on what I'm seeing from the outside, it's the nicest complex of housing we've ever seen.
Huge concrete block rooms, very nice recreational areas. Los Pinos, the bell pepper and tomato grower, they conform to that too. But they claimed, we don't need to go any higher because we're giving free housing to our employees.
So we went to Los Pinos to find out what had been going on there, and surprisingly, they met with us. Hubo mucho movimiento, y las quejas de ellos eran que no habían subido los sueldos en muchos años.
Pues en primer lugar estamos cumpliendo con la ley de lo que te comentaba, con la ley mexicana, y estamos pagando en el mínimo, es el doble, más del doble del salario mínimo en México.
They did let us into the camp, but following closely was a worker for Los Pinos carrying a video camera and a tape recorder, following everything I did. And they also kept close watch on Don Bartletti.
Y una de las partes que me llamó mucho la atención es, además de toda la parte técnica y de producción, es la responsabilidad social tan alta que tiene el grupo, como una filosofía de vida prácticamente.
I approached one laborer. I started asking him questions, And he was very honest with his answers, and I think it made them uncomfortable. They stuck a microphone into the laborers, right next to the laborer. They started filming him. They made him uncomfortable. They kept on interrupting my interview. Gave me the impression that they wanted me to stop the interview.
Sus fundadores y socios están muy comprometidos con lo que es el apoyo a la gente, a la sociedad, y es por eso que, bueno, todo lo que estamos viendo aquí y todos los recursos que la empresa hoy por hoy invierte para que esto sea una realidad.
What happened at Los Pinos today was significant. This is the first time this company that's been around for decades really opened up their operations to outsiders. That was a view that most reporters have never seen before. And they have been harshly criticized over the years for not paying good enough wages. Other big growers raised their wages up to 220 pesos. Pinos is only paying 150 pesos.
And that's the crux of it, this whole argument. How much do you want to sacrifice for the benefit of the worker? Yeah, it's the crippling reality of capitalism. The strikers' claims about treatment of workers at both Berry-Mex and Driscoll's and at Los Pinos are not now as clear-cut to me, because the owners of these concerns gave us intimate tours of their camps and their growing areas. And I was actually quite surprised at the camp, this huge camp run by Los Pinos. Even though the rooms were small and they were kind of cramped, they had big playing fields, soccer fields, baseball fields, big open areas. They had common areas, they had babysitting, and they had doctors. Both places did.
You talk to people in the industry, they'll tell me that though progress from here on out might be slow, it did forever change the situation. Much of America now knows that much of their produce is coming from these export farms with a history of labor abuses, and that the industry must now react and must respond and address these issues.
So it is the retailer's responsibility, and they'll have the most effect. If a retailer like Walmart says, if you don't treat those people better, we're not going to buy from you, there'll be change, believe me.
I think the story is basically about our changing world and how so interconnected we are, and how consumers care so much more about what they consume, what they buy. Being allowed to report Product of Mexico is the reason I'm in this field.
Unless you see it for yourself, you really can't do journalism on the telephone. You can't do it listening to the opinions of just a few people.
I'm very lucky. I worked for the Los Angeles Times for great editors who realized the importance of this story and gave me the time and the resources to do it.
Product of Mexico and the coverage of the Baja strikes is a snapshot of humanity. Fair treatment, the struggle that the invisible people are living through. And when you read it and see the pictures and see the greater issue in the wrinkles and the dirty fingers and the tears and the conditions under which people are living, I hope that you will know that everything isn't perfect in this world, and it's not perfect in your perfect, beautiful supermarket. There's always a backstory, and you deserve to know that, and that's what I'm passionate about saying and telling.